My name is Graham Brown. I'm the Managing Director here at Gyrocom, and welcome to the first of our whiteboard sessions. It's the first in a series of informative sessions, hopefully, that we'll be delivering over the next few months. I thought it'd be a good opportunity and a good place to start to really talk about the core problem that we face when engaging with our clients. So our clients are typically large and medium-sized enterprise organizations with complicated IT environments. So what we've got here on the whiteboard is a little bit of a graphical representation of what we typically see within the organizations that we spend our time talking to. So we have a central data center hosting line of business applications. So there's an element of being able to sort of take technologies and automate the processes that are specific to their business. Typically, the organizations we deal with run in a distributed IT environment over some sort of private network. So over the last 15 years or so, the king of that environment has been MPLS. In addition to that, and a lot more recently, what we're finding is that organizations are taking the benefits that cloud technologies provide and using the internet as a much more integral part of their strategy for connectivity out of things like infrastructure as a service, even platform as a service, and also, much more increasingly, software as a service. So here we're talking about things like Office 365 or Salesforce.com. So this is looking at the internet as a much more integral delivery requirement for corporate organizations and the applications that they require to run their businesses. At an infrastructure level, we have various different silos of infrastructure, but irrespective of cloud or internal delivery in the data center, those infrastructure silos remain relatively constant. So we have compute, storage, network, security, and the infrastructure required to manage each of those silos. We also work with organizations that have split decision making in terms of their IT departments. Their IT requirement is significant enough for there to be multiple areas of coverage. So we see that split in numerous different ways, but classically you've got development, sort of project-driven activity against operations, and then aligned at an infrastructure level to the different silos that we see on the left-hand side of our whiteboard there, but also applications, maybe different variants of applications, so database, operating system, or some sort of core line of business application. When an organization has a new requirement, then we're looking at being able to mobilize all of these different silos from an infrastructure perspective. So if you look at the initial stages of a new requirement, then dev and test, let's say we define that as day zero, you have a certain set of requirements where potentially these days it is much easier for an organization to look at something like infrastructure as a service as an execution venue for that early stage, the early stage in terms of deployment. As we then move out of dev and test and move into production, there are a number of decisions that need to be made across this split decision matrix. There are infrastructure requirements, there are application requirements. The operational requirements start to become more of a focus, but have not yet come right to the fore. So moving it into production, or day one, as we will define it, then we need to make a decision as to whether or not that function sits infrastructure as a service, or maybe moves back into the core data center to sit within the standard production estate that we've built up over the last 15 to 20 years. There are all sorts of considerations that we've got there. But equally, we then, once we move into the early stages of production, we need to look at how that functionality is being used, adopted, how it needs to scale, how the organization or our customers are starting to use that piece. So we move out into the day two side of things, or the operations piece. Now, the difference between dev, test, production, and operations is the first two phases have what would be predefined project timelines. We have a certain amount of time to work within this space, we have a certain amount of time to move it out to production, But this is really where the sort of everything comes home to roost, because this is required from that point to the end of time, or to the point at which you're looking to decommission that function or replace it with something else. So the compound interest effect in terms of the overall cost manifests in day two operations. And this is borne out a little bit by how we see in a typical organisation that the IT budgets are aligned. So if we look at a typical organisation based on analysts' data, then how we see budgets are assigned is typically 70% just to keep the lights on for what you've already got, 20% for growing out existing infrastructure but not necessarily adding in any new capability. So we're talking about capacity or replacement, decommission of underlying infrastructure, those sort of things, or 10% for transformational. And it's this that adds incremental value. It's this sort of function that allows organizations to go out and address different capabilities, different markets, create that sort of disruption within the markets that they operate. And actually it's really quite a small percentage of the overall budget. So looking at that in a different way in terms of how it works out across different elements from an infrastructure standpoint, we see a different sort of split. So 20% on hardware, 20% on software, and 20% on outsource or third-party activities, and 40% on people. So we see our major cost bases as being keeping the lights on and maintaining the people. And they both align to this day two operations type of mentality. So the sort of benefit that an organisation like Gyrocom provides to the customers that we talk to is how can we look at solutions that help realign some of this, because actually we want to focus more of the available money in the transformational area and reduce the associated cost of how we're keeping the existing lights on. So if we apply to some of the technology areas that we're working in today, then there's a big conversation about software-defined networking and network virtualization, where it could be perceived that something we didn't need 18 to 24 months ago, such as overlay networks in the software-defined networking space, can be perceived as being expensive at the dev and test area and at the production area, with people making decisions about project budgets, whereas the real benefits of those technologies, as I say, using the phrase again, come home to roost in the day two operations, but the operational context in the split decision making has little influence at the stage where the initial decisions are made, in order to impact that. That's a problem that we see over and over again in terms of how you can better align. Having a view of the impact of the delivery of day two operations at the point you start the project is a conversation that repeats over and over again to our customers. You couple that with the fact that everything that we do is coming under a much more significant business pressure. We need to deliver things faster, we need to deliver more of them, and they are all technology enabled. So the pressure in this environment, the incredible complexity that we've got with this environment is increasing all the time. And this is what we aim to help our clients with. So as I said, my name's been Graham. I hope you found this interesting, and thank you for your attention.